Welcome back to Big Green Gaming. Today we're getting back to another series on the channel called Big Green Gaming Budget Tech, the show where we look at gaming related tech for at, around, or under $50 and tell you if it's worth your hard-earned money or not. For today's video, we'll be taking a look at the mini wired gamepad for the PlayStation 4. Amazon has it listed for around $30, so let's dive in and see if it's worth your hard-earned money. So truth be told, I actually picked up this controller at Target for around $15, so much under that Amazon price point of $30, but at the time I thought it was a great deal and certainly a rather unique controller, and I thought it looks cool, and blue is my favorite color, so I figured it'd be a good time to pick up this controller and give it a shot. But what really led me to this controller was the fact that it was officially licensed by Sony. If you go on Amazon or eBay and just search like generic PS4 controller under $50 or something like that, you'll see lots of stuff that clearly is not of the best quality. Maybe it works well, maybe it doesn't, but who really knows? So at least with this controller you're getting a product that Sony has given their blessing to, and it should work and perform all the functions of the PS4 very, very well. So obviously I centered things up a little bit here, but let's look at the design of this controller. So obviously it's got a rather flat design, not a lot of curves or anything like that, but it has all the essential buttons of the PS4. Square, circle, triangle, X, your D-pad, 2 analog sticks, your home button, a share and options button, and a touchpad button. And you also have your L2 and R2 and L1 and R1 buttons. And obviously I have the blue controller here because blue is my favorite color, but I've also seen a red version of this controller as well as a black version of this controller as well, and there might be other options out there, so you do have some variety to choose from. So when I got to playing with this controller, it really reminded me of playing games on an older console. It's similar to shape as something like the Genesis controller, or maybe even like a Super Nintendo controller, and if you squint hard enough you can maybe see a little bit of an NES controller design. And what I mean by that, it's a very flat device, as I mentioned earlier. There's not a whole lot of curvature going on, you don't have a ton of handles like the standard DualShock 4 does have, and it's really just a nice design if you want to sort of have a retro feeling going on while you're playing your PlayStation 4 games. So because this controller sort of reminds me of those older systems, I really wanted to play games that felt like they're from an era in the past. So I've been playing lots of Ratchet & Clank and other platformers with this game, but also stuff like Sonic Mania, because it kind of reminds me of the Genesis controller somewhat. So any retro-themed games or even platformers that you have in your PlayStation library, this controller would be absolutely perfect for. One of the biggest draws to this controller, and something that a lot of other people have really looked at, is the fact that it is much smaller than the standard DualShock 4 controller. And because of that, it's sort of, I've seen this targeted towards children. It's roughly 40% smaller according to the Amazon listing, so it's ideal for people who maybe have smaller hands. Obviously as an adult, I still enjoy this controller quite a bit, but I've seen this marketed towards children a lot. So with the idea that children might enjoy this in mind, it kind of makes sense that there is a USB controller here. Where they can take it to a friend's house without really having to worry about syncing it up to another PlayStation 4 system, and they can just plug it in and it works well. I also think that the wire is there for two other really practical reasons. It obviously keeps costs down so that the controller can be made more cheaply, but it also means that you won't have to worry about charging this controller, which makes it more ideal for kids as they can just plug it in, not have to worry about a battery or anything like that. There are some negatives with this controller. For example, you're going to have a very bad time playing any kind of first-person shooter with this. These triggers are not all triggers, they're actually just buttons, and it's very easy to accidentally hit the L1 and R1 button. If you're playing like Call of Duty, maybe you'll accidentally throw a grenade instead of shooting, and that can just become a mess pretty quickly. And I've also tried to play Rocket League with this controller with less than fantastic results, because you have to kind of keep R2 held down the entire time when you're playing Rocket League, and it doesn't really work out super well for a game that requires tons and tons of really precise movement. Now, the one big negative aspect of this controller that I kind of hinted on earlier is that it doesn't have a fully featured touchpad. As you can see there, the touchpad is just a button. And for most games, it's probably fine, because not every game, especially games that are cross-platform, use the touchpad for anything much more than just the pure button functionality. But if you need a game that requires more swiping input, it's going to be simply impossible to use this controller for that. The only two games that I can really think that require that are Killzone Shadow Fall, but also Infamous Second Son. But maybe there's some sort of accessibility setting or something in the game's menus that will let you bypass the touchpad, but those two games aren't going to work well with this controller, and I don't think it'll be a big issue because I think most games that should be just fine. The only other real downside to this controller is that sometimes your thumbs may touch sort of like that if you move them in towards one another. I've had this happen a few times when I was playing Rocket League, that's why I said it's not super great for really precise movement, but not a huge issue at all, and I think I've covered just about all the issues I did have with this controller. So overall, not a bad controller at all. I think it's a great alternative to something like the DualShock 4 if you have kids and the DualShock 4 is maybe slightly too big, but if you also just want to use the controller as sort of a retro-styled controller for retro-styled games, this is absolutely perfect for that. Well, that's all for me, guys. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe and share this video with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh, awesome, you guys are still here. So I wanted to sort of throw this in at the end of this video because I didn't feel like it was really worth a review of its own. As you can see, I'm kind of just freelancing here, going without a script. I wanted to talk about these Gripit analog sticks. They're from a company called Total Control on Amazon. The reason that I bought these was because on my black controller, I can grab that here. As you can see, I got a nice Doom sticker I also got from Amazon for pre-ordering Doom Eternal early. So as was the big issue with these sort of launch controller devices, these analog sticks, I think I can take this Gripit guy off here. Yeah, as you can see, it just kind of tore apart and kind of looks disgustingly gross. So I wanted to be able to use this controller still, so I bought these Gripit sticks to slide on the controller. And as you can see, I'm having issues, but it does get on there somehow. And I wanted just the black ones mostly, but they came with also the blue as well, and I thought it looked nice on this already blue controller. And actually, I like this product a lot. I'm not going to go as far to say that it completely changes the way I play video games or anything like that, but I have found it a little easier to aim in something like The Last of Us or something like Call of Duty maybe, and it's just overall a nice little product, and it was only $5, so I decided that it'd be nice and worth it to be able to upgrade this controller here. And yeah, just not a bad device at all. Oh, I guess not really a device, not a bad product at all, and just something that I thought was kind of cool and I wanted to share.